Elden Ring, From Software's first attempt at a true open world, is incredible. Souls games of the past have always been renowned for three major factors: their complex stories and characters, their connected maze-like worlds, and of course, the difficulty. Because open world games are, well, open, how did FromSoft weave these core parts of the Souls experience into the world and have it work so seamlessly? In celebration of Elden Ring's first anniversary, that is just what we're going to talk about today. So rise Tarnished, click that subscribe button, and join me as we explore the success of the Lands Between. First of all, characters and plot. Souls games are notorious for their lack of hand-holding. This is evident in not only their gameplay, but also the stories they tell. One key way these games give you information is found in item descriptions. Although I don't personally feel compelled to read the description of every item I pick up, I still think it's interesting that From Software sticks to using this method of storytelling. This was also one of the key factors behind Elden Ring's Best Narrative nomination controversy at the Game Awards last year. On the outside, Elden Ring doesn't appear to have any story, obvious objectives, or easily accessible lore. However, anybody who has either watched a Vati Vidya, prepared a cry video, or has actually played the games knows that this is not the case. Elden Ring in particular has a story way too complex for me to explain now, but what matters is that, well, you don't really need to know any of it to enjoy the game. In previous games, yeah, you might have needed to do a bit of googling to get the full experience, but in Elden Ring, much like other open world games like Breath of the Wild, the focus is more on the world and how you traverse it. I'm not saying the story is bad or not important, because it isn't bad, and it certainly is important. It better be if it's got George R.R. Martin's name attached to it, but what I'm trying to say is that even if you don't really understand what's going on, you'll still have a fun time. Look at me, I'm dumb as rocks, and even I know the difference between Noxtella and Nocron. Wait, hold on a second. Moving on to characters, Elden Ring has a lot of them. You have Alexander, who is literally a jar. Then there's this guy who calls you maidenless at the beginning of the game.
Fortunately for you, however, you are maidenless.
And then you have characters like Ranni the Witch, who has 4 arms. Most, if not all, of the characters in this game have lots of dialogue and quests for you to complete, 90% of which ended them dying. You don't get a giant pop-up or anything when you get a quest, you just need to listen to what they say and work it out from there. Much like the gameplay and the previously mentioned story, the characters and their quests do not hold your hand. You attack this guy because you do in fact get maidens. Too bad, he will now proceed to beat you to death with his... Hold on, is that a bouquet of flowers? Great. Many characters also help build the world and are there to expand your knowledge of it. For instance, did you know that all of those jars sitting around are actually filled with the rotting corpses of fallen warriors, which we see Alexander collecting at the end of a Radahn festival? No? NPC questlines are a big part of this game and very often are interconnected with each other. For instance, to progress Fia's questline, you need to do like half of Ranni's questline. There are no objectives in this game but a simple fetch quest. In fact, the most simple quest I can think of is Irina's quest, where you talk to her, go to Castle Morn, fight all the enemies, talk to her father, kill the boss, go back to her, and she's dead. Of course she is. Great. great. This took me about an hour and a half in total, most of which was exploring the castle and dying to the stupid dogs. These quests don't often have traditional rewards. Most likely when you complete a quest, your reward will actually be obtained along the way, rather than traditionally at the end, which I kinda like. It's a cool little thing. Many of these side quests eventually tie in with the main quest and contribute to some of the game's multiple endings. Remember Irina's father from earlier? When he found out that his daughter had been killed by Misbegotten, he swore to hunt down every last one. Up until a couple of months ago, I thought he was all talk. But one day I was exploring the lake surrounding the Raya Lucaria Academy, and I found this path, strewn with the corpses of Misbegotten. I kept walking till I came across a shack in the middle of the woods. Then I was invaded by Edgar, who had been driven mad by his grief. After being forced to kill him, I obtained his powerful halberd and a Shabriri grape, an item essential for the Flame of Frenzy ending. This is the main point I want to get across in the video. The game on the outside may appear unforgiving and hostile, but if you dig deeper and look under the surface, you will be rewarded. Before we move on, I just wanted to say that all of the characters are written incredibly and have some of the best voice acting I've ever heard in a game. Seriously, I could listen to Blythe talk all day. Like this guy is cool. He is really cool.
Glad to have you in the service of Mistress Rani. Well, getting right to business. I'm still in Limgrave. The eternal city of Nokron lies somewhere at the bottom of this land. I'm planning to go below through the well in the Mistwood. See if I can't find the road to Nokron from there.
Moving on to Elden Ring's world design. Okay, where do I begin? I think a good place to start are the markers, which there aren't many of. I'm not really referring to the beacons, pins, and other objectives you can place yourself on the map, but more so quest markers. In many games, if you need to talk to a specific NPC, often their location will be marked on your map, completely removing the need to look around and search for them. Unfortunately, this often ruins any immersion you usually get from a game, as it usually feels less like you're searching for someone and more like another obstacle you need to overcome to get on with the fun parts. But in Elden Ring, very rarely do characters mark things on your map for you. Pair this with a lack of a quest log and you have an experience driven by your own curiosity and your curiosity alone. The only occasion I can think of off the top of my head when somebody does mark something are the Volcano Manor targets, and those don't exactly give you any fantastic rewards, just access to an amazing boss. An interesting point brought up by Game Maker's Toolkit is that in the early to mid-game, Elden Ring's world is like the open world equivalent of a funnel. Yeah, you have your optional areas like Caelid, Mount Gelmir, and the Weeping Peninsula, but all the main story areas are arranged like so. Limgrave is first, acting like an introduction to the game's various mechanics, stealth, ashes of war, NPCs, bosses, and most importantly, the art of running away. In between Limgrave and the next major area lies Stormvale Castle, the game's first legacy dungeon. Filled with tough enemies and constructed like a big interconnected maze, this area will pose a decent challenge to anybody who is unprepared or hasn't fully grasped the game's mechanics and concepts. In my opinion, this area acts like almost like a training ground, as many enemies here are similar to the creatures encountered in later portions of the game. Next is Liurnia of the Lakes and the Raya Lucaria Academy. If Limgrave and Stormvale exist to teach you how to fight in melee combat, Liurnia and its legacy dungeon help to train you to fight fire with fire, that being magic. Most enemies in this area incorporate magic into their movesets in some way, and your best course of action is to build up your own arsenal of magic-based attacks to counter these new foes. For the next area, you have two options. You can either 1. Enter the Altus Plateau the cringe way by taking the Grand Lift of Dectus after finding the two halves of the medallion needed to activate it, or you could be based and find the hidden ruin-strewn precipice, fight the Magma Worm, and then take a second lift up. Once you have entered the Altus Plateau and have decided your fate, you can now either enter Mount Gelmir and fight your way through an optional legacy dungeon known as the Volcano Manor, or you could choose to begin the trek up to another legacy dungeon, Leyndell Royal Capital. After a handful of boss fights, you can then wind up in the game's linear endgame, which starts in the mountaintops of the Giants, then Melina gets set on fire, and you end up in Florida, crumbling Faramazua. After some more boss fights, including Pain and Suffering Incarnate, you can then head back to Leyndell, now the Ashen Capital, and beat the game. Jesus, that was long. We still haven't even covered all the areas. Yeah, there's more of them. On screen now is a list of all of the locations I didn't mention or didn't pay much attention to. Caelid being a very interesting one, as you will find yourself constantly going back there to see if you're strong enough to push through. Spoilers, you aren't. By the way, that ruin-strewn precipice I mentioned earlier was an incredible moment when I discovered it. I was doing the Volcano Manor questline and was searching for the target I'd been said to hunt down, but I couldn't find them at all. So I thought, wait a minute, maybe he's under me. So I took the Grand Lift of Dectus back down into Liurnia, and sure enough, there was an elevator that led into what I thought was a mine. The area I stumbled into was amazing, filled with all sorts of loot and monsters, but at the very end was a giant magma worm. We fought long and hard, but eventually I came out on top. I rested at the site of grace nearby and saw what I'd been searching for this whole time, that glowing red summon sign. Unfortunately, for most of my run, I'd been looking online at Elden Ring guides and tutorials to help me find cool weapons and stuff, but somehow, I never got spoiled that this was here. No one mentioned it. I discovered this place organically, and it felt so good. Before we continue on to the next point, I just want to take this opportunity to praise this game's audio direction. First off, the soundtrack. Wow. Just wow. I think FromSoft knew what they were doing when they made one of the best songs of the whole game, both the final boss theme and the main menu music. In terms of particular songs, the Godskin Apostle track is probably my favorite. I don't know, just the orchestra and the choir both going all over the place throughout the whole track really makes me want to boot up the game every time I hear it. Well, Elden Ring, like most other games, has very relaxed themes when you are walking the lands between. There's a strange feel to the songs, like they're on edge, further adding to the tension you feel, like something could jump out at you at all times. The songs all make me feel uneasy when they get to particular points in each of the tracks. The world is beautiful, probably the most well-crafted I've experienced since I played Breath of the Wild for the first time, but it's dangerous beyond belief. And the soundtracks all reflect that. For every Lane-Dell with its angelic horns and strings, you have a star-scorched Radahn with bombastic drums and the choir exploding with every swing. Elden Ring not only excels in terms of its soundtrack, but the overall sound design and the effects are all incredible. There is nothing, and I mean nothing more satisfying than breaking an enemy's stance and hearing that. Oh! It's so good. The enemies all sound terrifying and just hey, do you mind? Hey, please stop screaming. Now it is time to talk about what is, without a doubt, the most infamous part of any Souls game: the difficulty. Anything and everything can and will kill you in this game. Rats, dogs, birds, dragons, knights, bulls, lakes of poison, bigger dragons, bigger lakes of poison, bigger balls. Why is this game so hard? Look, what I'm trying to say is that going into this game with the expectation of dying once or twice to a boss and then beating them without taking a single hit of damage is completely out of the question and is missing the point entirely. Dying in these games isn't a punishment, it's a lesson. You realize what you did wrong, and then you try and avoid that same mistake again. Basically, think of Elden Ring like that Tom Cruise movie with the aliens and the mechs and stuff. Anyway, on to bosses. This game has a lot of them. Unfortunately, most are reused, but the main demigods are what we're here to talk about. There are a total of 10, all of which are challenging in their own right. Radahn requires fast dodging and maybe a bit of help from allies. The Elden Beast requires a lot of running, and Renala requires that you don't fall asleep in the first phase and then get obliterated in the second. All of these bosses rely on your understanding of the game's most common feature, dodging. While the dodging animation is playing, you gain a very brief period of invincibility. This is used most commonly to dodge through oncoming attacks. This is a key part of the game you need to know if you want to succeed. Timing is everything, and if you fail to master it, the results may be fatal. But don't worry, it's not just the game's enemies and bosses that are out to kill you, but the level design as well. Many things stand in between you and your objective. Lakes of poison, invisible walls, traps, fake chests, and many more. Much like the music, this really helps make you feel uneasy, as if any chest you open will suddenly teleport you to Central Caelid, like the last one did.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Elden Ring. Truly an experience I will never forget. I'd never thought I would attempt a Souls game in my life, let alone have it be one of my favorite games ever. Over my 80-hour journey, the game has taught me many things about game design and user experience, many of which I will be keeping an eye out for in future videos about other open world games. I haven't beaten Elden Ring, and I might never beat Elden Ring, but that's okay, because despite my lack of skill, patience, and at times, intelligence, I will always remember how Elden Ring perfected discovery. Hey, you. Yeah, you. Yeah, hey. So, thanks for watching the video. I've been planning this one for a long time, since I got the game back in, like, May last year, which is crazy to see it finally out, but that's good. And having it finally up is a massive relief. Gathering footage for this one was kind of challenging, but I think the end result is worth it. I hope you all enjoyed the video. If you did, consider leaving a like. You can even comment if you feel like it. May we meet again, Tarnished. Stay safe and stay subscribed.